Everybody, it's Barbara Threecrow. I'm talking to you from Turtle Island over here. Wherever you are, welcome to peopleforpeople.ning.com. I'm happy to be here today with you. It's good to see everybody out there. We had a really quite extraordinary show yesterday. Patty and I and all People for People got together and threw a love bomb at Shaziz, and he actually got hit with it. So I just wanted to, if you weren't around for our show, Turtle and Crow show yesterday, I guess our brother Shaziz had been sort of on the edge, on the brink of stepping off the cliff, and we all pulled together, and it actually, this is what he said. He wrote this. He said, something amazing happened today. Now, this came out at 1 p.m., 1:02 p.m., so today. Something amazing happened today. Actually, it was yesterday, 1 in the morning, I guess. I have been so battle-weary for so long, and it had brought me to the point where there was only a very tiny spark left in my spirit. I wanted to lay down my sword of truth and shield of love and walk off the battlefield of life. I mean, that's pretty heavy. I was at the edge of the battlefield ready to step out, and like a mighty wind, two very beautiful ladies ran up and threw a ton of fuel onto that very weakened spark, igniting a fire in my spirit, stronger than the one I had in my youth. With their loving words and wisdom and inspiration, the wind filled my sails beyond all imagination. I did not see it, but today they showed me that I had already found the dream team. I was too blinded by the world to see them, but they had been there all along. And People for People Radio and all their wonderful family in the chat room, always ready with a kind word of love and great brilliance, and they have been there through it all. I'm sorry that I did not see, but now I do. Says the Turtle and Crow show on the 5th of August filled my eyes with tears and my heart and much needed love to bring me out of the darkness that I found myself in once again. I am back in the fight stronger than ever because I know the need is great and the cause is just. This world needs all the love we can muster because of the words of these wonderful spirits. I refuse to put my piece of the puzzle back into the box. Thank you so very much. I am truly humbled and so very blessed and honored to have such an amazing family in People for People and Shazuz Radio. I can't promise I won't fall again, but I have faith that the Dream Team is powerful and will have my back just as I will have theirs. These are troubling yet amazing times, but together with people like these by my side, we got this thing. We can fix this world, and I believe that with all that I am. I have the dust brushed off now thanks to you, and I am going after the evil with the brightest light that I have ever witnessed in my entire life. Thank you, Barbara and Patty. I love you so very much for all that you are and all that you have done. Thank you for everything. Shaz is back and ready to mow down the darkness with the brightest light of love this world has ever seen. I needed to hear those words more than you will ever know. Yeah, so I was happy to see that, when I opened up the chat. And I hope you all heard that, and it's a good thumbs up for us today. It's a good feeling that we can help someone, and we did it all together, which is really awesome. So I'm going to, I've been reading from my book, The Return of the Sacred Feminine and Teachings of the Grandmothers in Spirit. And I'm sharing some of my personal experiences with you, like what sometimes I call these miracles, because they're just like a phenomenon that you look at it and say, well, that's like a miracle, it's like, this is not a everyday happening kind of thing. But I know we all have these kinds of experiences, and that's why I'm sharing mine with you, so that you don't, so you don't think you're crazy, because I'm not crazy, and if I've had these experiences and you have these experiences, well, frankly, this is about the great mystery, and these are possibilities that we all can have, these types of experiences. So today I'm going to talk to you about spider medicine, okay? Now, so what is spider medicine? Well, there are all kinds of medicines in our tradition. We call them like a medicine is a guide or a helper. It's an ally or an animal or something that comes to you in a very powerful and unique and unusual manner. And so this is about the spider, my experience with an extraordinary spider, actually. And so I'm going to read about that. So one summer, a spider built a magnificent web outside of my shop window. The spider was spectacular, her body about the size of a silver dollar. She had intricate designs of black and yellow. The strands of her web were unusually thick, like spun cotton, and I would watch, fascinated, as she danced across the web, spinning like an old woman. People would often stop by and look at her, too, and they'd take photos of her, and I would remind them not to disturb her. Every day, I would greet her, exclaiming at her beauty, making sure she was safe. So then one day, I began thinking of the coming winter, and I wondered where she might go. And suddenly a thought just popped into my mind, and it was that she might come inside and stay by the window. I had plants in the window and a little fountain, and I thought, well, she could hang out in there. And I felt she would be safe there, and in the spring, then she could go back outside. Well, that very night, I had a dream, and the spider came to me, and she told me that she was going to come inside to live. The next day, when I looked at her web, she was gone. I entered into my shop, and I walked through a long, thick strand of spider web. It was right across the door, and I knew immediately that she had come in through this small opening beneath the front door. But I searched throughout the day for her. I was unable to find her. But later that afternoon, while I stood talking with a customer, I reached for a blouse nearby, and to my great surprise, there sat the spider. Now, this is a very important part of the story, right here. I reacted without thinking, and I proceeded to pick her up and place her back outside on her web. And I never saw her again. Now, it was years later, and after I had met my Lakota spiritual teacher, that I had gained more knowledge regarding spiritual messengers or allies or helpers from nature. And I realized my mistake. Now, I was really overcome with a great sadness that I had not understood the sacred gift that spider had given to me. I decided to pray and communicate with the spider, and I asked Grandmother Spider to forgive me for my ignorance. And now, earlier that morning, I had been prompted to pick an animal card. I don't know if you know what they are, but there's these cards. I used to do this a long time ago. There's cards with animals on them, and they have a message for you. And I was going to pick one that morning, but instead I put them on the side, and I really didn't do it, and I forgot. So I guess I was too busy. But anyway, upon finishing my prayer to Grandmother Spider, I decided to pick a card. At first I held the cards face down and immediately felt a distinct vibration in my hands in relation to a particular card. And that's how I do it. This long proven signal told me that this particular card was the one that I should choose. Upon turning it over, I saw that I had picked, yes, you got it, the spider card. So I was reminded that Spirit is always listening to us. And the next morning I found that during the night I had been bitten by a spider. A few days prior to that, I had received an email from a woman whose husband had twice been bitten by a brown recluse. These are kind of serious spider bites. What I got bit by was not a brown recluse, but I kind of shared the importance of, to me, what I knew about, well, what happens when something unusual occurs and what might it mean. It could be a message. So a spider, may be giving us a message or something else when it shows itself to us. So, I kind of shared that with her, and I said maybe your husband was being contacted by the spirit of spider, and he might consider offering tobacco and praying for the guidance from spider. And this is what we do. This is part of my tradition. Okay? So I'm just sharing that with you. I also shared with her my own story of the spider's communication during the dream time, and I shared the mistake that I had made and how I had disrespected what I felt was that I ignored and disrespected that beautiful, the spider nation, or, Iktomi. That's what we call spider, is Iktomi. Now, even after receiving signs that Grandmother Spider forgave me, I was still not able to forgive myself. And this is another very important part of this story. It's really getting to know that, it's like the spirit doesn't hold grudges against us. Grandmother Spider was there to give me a lesson, a teaching, right? I was the one that was holding on to, I made a mistake. I did something bad. I was stupid. I didn't get it. That whole stuff. So anyway, there's no really room for that when we're in the learning about the spiritual way. It's just learning. Take the experience and learn from it. Don't beat yourself up is the message here. So many years passed by, and although I had put what happened that day out of my mind, she was still not finished with me. The spirits seem to know our deepest thoughts, don't they? And spiders, as all creatures are our teachers, and often give signs to show that they are present. Many years passed by, and I had been guided to the Lakota tradition, and I was participating at one of the most sacred and powerful ceremonies of the Lakota, the Sundance, held in South Dakota, where I received another message from Grandmother Spider. So I had been praying, asking for a sign that would guide me. And after I finished dancing, I had taken up a position near the east gate of the Sundance grounds to support others who remained dancing. Now I noticed a medicine man who was also a chief of the Sundance. His name was Crazy Bull. He was a Heyoka medicine man, and he was dancing in the center, and he began to move away from the other dancers and was walking directly toward me. As he approached me, I saw that he held a long piece of yellow and black fabric. He stood in front of me and handed me the fabric. He spoke, saying that I should pray about what I had been thinking on and make an offering of tobacco, and then put the tobacco tie or the offering on the tree of life. Now, the tree of life is the tree that stands in the center of the Sundance grounds. Now, I was quite shocked that he had come up to me, but I took the fabric and I did what he told me to do. I prayed, and then I tied the prayer robe to the sacred tree. I then went to him. As is customary when approaching an elder for advice, I offered him our sacred tobacco. You know, there are times we experience what might seem to us to be something out of the ordinary, even strange. Yet in the world of medicine men and women, such experiences are pretty normal. You see, it turned out that the chief who approached me carried, spider medicine. It's what we call spider medicine. So I mentioned before how Spirit hears our prayers and knows where we need to be guided. So it so happened that before going to the arbor that day at the Sundance, that I had been praying, asking to whom I should speak with regarding some of the extraordinary experiences that occurred in my life, one of which was that experience with the spider. So as the day was ending, I entered the chief's teepee. We sat together for several hours while I described how the ants had taken my tobacco offering and of being led to find the celestial stone. And by the way, I told you about that last Tuesday. I spoke about that stone that had fallen from the sky, and I found it in that trash pile, that dump along the road, remember? And I told him of my journey to Greengrass, South Dakota, and of meeting the keepers of the white buffalo miracle. And of course I spoke of my regret and sadness about my disregard for the spider for Iktomi. Now when I had finished, he spoke. He explained how to keep sacred stones in a bundle with cedar, and then he said that the white buffalo calf woman had recognized me. And why I'm this about, I want to just share a little bit more about the sacred stones in a bundle. So if you have sacred stones that you work with, the particular stones that we work with, not crystals, but the particular stones that we work with, like that celestial stone that fell from the sky, keep them in a little pouch with cedar, with dried cedar. The spirit of the stone likes to be in the cedar, which in the cedar is also a very sacred plant, and it's also used as a medicine. So that's just a little bit of information there if you happen to work with stones. So after the Sundance, when I arrived home, well, I found a spider web completely covering the doorway and entrance to my home. Yeah, the whole doorway. There was a little porch, and I had to go onto the porch and then open the door into the house, but the enclosed-in porch, the whole doorway was covered with a spider web. So I wasn't able to get in, but I offered tobacco, and I removed a small corner of the web close to the floor, and I actually had to crawl through the opening of that web and leaving the rest of the web intact. I didn't want to break the web. The next morning, the spider was gone, and the web no longer there. Now, I felt that the spider building her web in such an obvious place was a clear message to me. Okay, the message was that she had forgiven me and that I needed to stop this nonsense and forgive myself. I needed to stop hanging on to this guilt and regret and forgive myself. Come on, move on. Let's go. Yeah. So the medicine of Grandmother Spider is very powerful. And going about her work creating and spinning the web of life, she never wavers against the task before her. And if we observe her closely, we realize that there is nothing that prevents her from succeeding. No great wind or no driving rain or fallen branch. She's just persistent, diligent, and committed, and she'll just start all over again. weaving her web. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you about ant medicine, the ant people, and Uwhippy stones. Now, Uwhippy stones, okay, these Uwhippy stones are very tiny crystals, and I'm going to share about how they're formed and what they're used for and so on. And here's the story. Again, this is an experience I had that, again, I'm going to refer to it as one of those miracle moments, a phenomenon that is quite unusual and quite powerful. Ant medicine, Uwhippy stones. According to ancient beliefs, the creatures of the earth were to be teachers to the two-legged, the humans, and all people originally were given the gift and the ability to communicate with the creatures. Now, indigenous people, whenever receiving help and guidance from an animal, believed this to be a medicine gift and having a great power to be used with respect. For instance, a particular colony of red ants are said to create a special crystal stone. The ants polish these tiny stones and leave them on their anthill. The tiny stones, or crystals, are called Uwhippy stones, and to some native tribes they are powerful medicine. Now, these Uwhippy stones are gathered for use in rattles for specific healing ceremonies. And actually, there's 405 that you have. These are about the size of your pinky nail, maybe a little bit smaller. So they're very small. So Grandfather Black Elk had asked me to keep an eye out for these sacred stones, and it is not always easy to find such rare and sacred stones. So for several years, I searched without much luck. But during a journey to the Black Hills, I was fortunate to have found several large ant hills, and along with two of my friends, we sat down beside the first ant hill and observed several ants milling about. On the top, they're just kind of like walking around on the top of their hill. But I saw suddenly all but one ant disappeared into the tiny hole into the center of their hill. Like they all disappeared except one. So as I looked closely, I noticed several Uwhippy stones scattered on their hill, and I addressed the one remaining ant, which this is what you do when you want to communicate with the beings. You talk to them. So I asked if I could take a few crystal stones and that they would be used. I said these would be used in a good way for ceremony. Now, as soon as I spoke those words, the ant proceeded to walk over to a crystal stone, picked it up, and carried it directly over the hill to where I was sitting and dropped it in front of me. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. It then disappeared down inside its anthill, went down the hole. I was really delighted and grateful and kind of like awed about this because we all three of us looked at each other and went, wow. That was one of those moments, right? So, after it disappeared and we got up and we were on our way walking to the next anthill, I suddenly realized, this was like one of those moments where I realized that I had gone about this in a very disrespectful way. What I realized was that I had forgotten to make an offering of tobacco. This is customary when taking something. When you ask for something or need something, you give an offering. So when we arrived at the second anthill, there was no sign of any ants at all, but I did see several Uwhippy stones. So we all sat down around the anthill, and I took out my tobacco, and I made a proper offering, which is what I did was I thanked the ant people beforehand for their generosity. And as I prayed with the tobacco, I sprinkled a handful over the hill, over their little anthill, asking for permission to take some of their sacred stones. As I sprinkled the tobacco all over the hill, suddenly many ants came from underneath the earth, out of that little hole, and began gathering up the tobacco. Yeah, they worked steadfastly, carrying tobacco down into the earth until every last drop of tobacco was gone. Yeah, that happened. That's pretty awesome. And I gathered some of the crystals, and I left a few remaining because you don't want to take it all. Now, to me, this was a beautiful teaching. It showed me how the creatures, our relatives, help us, and how they will communicate with us if we believe. And also, I was shown the importance of our having respect and gratitude for their willingness to help us. You know, I felt like they had been very generous with me because, you know, I forgot to give them tobacco originally. But even though at first I didn't do it, I made my offering afterwards. But yeah, this is what happened. So I look at this like I'm going to say to you, this is how I feel, that the creatures have been waiting for us, hoping that we will return to these ancient ways of the ancestors. Acting with spiritual consciousness, that's what this is remembering the importance of giving something to the relatives in return for their medicine gift. And by our offering tobacco, we are showing respect for the ancient ways. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the medicine, how to use this medicine. So I have a few of these unusual experiences that have happened to me in my lifetime. As I told you about the stone falling from the sky, the thunderstone. I told you about the Iktomi, the grandmother spider, and I just told you about the ant people, and that experience. I call these miracles because they're quite phenomenal. They're not your ordinary, usual, everyday experience, right? To me, they're kind of like a miracle, and it's amazing. So I've had this happen to me throughout my lifetime 22 different times. So on my altar in ceremony, I have 22 spirit helpers. So just to explain to you a little bit what that means. So it means, because I'm a ceremonial leader in the tradition of the Lakota people, so I have an altar that is laid out during a ceremony. And so I call upon these 22 different spiritual helpers, these elementals. There's, of course, the crows. The crows are one. The owls are another. And the spirits of the green nations are another. I think I told you a story a while back that the spirits of the tree people appeared to me. So that's another miracle and phenomenon. So I have 22 similar and unusual experiences with the creatures and the elementals, and they became what we call my medicine. So I call upon them for help in a lot of ways. Messengers to Great Spirit, to carry the messages, to carry the prayers, and help with other things. So I'm just giving you a little bit of an idea of how this kind of medicine works, and this teachings of that I'm sharing in the way that I have learned. Excuse me, I'm sorry, every time I start reading. Okay, so I'm going to continue here about an experience. Again, here's another story about ants and how the ants were giving a message to a friend of mine, and she wasn't listening. And so here, I'm going to share with you this story. It's really fascinating. So I visited a friend who was having difficulty with an invasion of red ants. She expressed how she had been killing so many, and yet they still kept invading her house. So I told her not to kill them, and she looked at me with reluctance, of course, as I explained that the ants were very possibly bringing her a message. So I told her that ant medicine is about patience. Now listen to this. See, this is important to know. So ant medicine is about patience and tenacity in meeting challenging situations. So she was not amused, of course, and even though she stopped killing them, she did not take my advice. I said to her, you might want to offer them some tobacco and pray to them, asking the spirit of the ant people to give you some clarity regarding a recent situation that you're dealing with. Now, I didn't know that she was dealing with anything. I mean, she didn't tell me, but I surmised, okay, that there was something going on with her because of this invasion of the ants. Was that a movie once? I don't know, maybe it was. I'm just joking. But anyway, so we left the following day on a camping trip. And after setting up our tents, she found it soon invaded by hundreds of tiny red ants. Yeah, we set the tents up, and then we went to the fire, and we were hanging out, and at night she took her flashlight to go back to get into her tent, and she let out this blood-curdling scream. The whole floor of her tent was just covered with ants. And she just lost it. She said, so I spoke to her about having patience. I said, have some patience. And she responded with anger, I'm trying to be patient, which was kind of amusing. So the following day, upon returning home, she found that her house was still overrun with ants. So finally, she followed my advice and made an offering of tobacco. She also told the ant people that she would gladly leave a gift of sugar water outside of the house for them if they would leave her home. So she sat quietly, asking the ant people for guidance, and soon she was surprised actually to receive an immediate answer, and that afternoon the ants did disappear. And she told me what the ants had said to her, and she was astounded that it was in direct relation to something she was dealing with, and that the guidance really helped her. So she received a message. So it is crucial to our developing our personal medicine that we pay close attention to the message the spirits bring us and take proper steps to show gratitude as well. You have to be willing to really want to sit, and you want to have to do this work or sacred work to learn, to reach different levels of spiritual communication and developing your awareness to the elementals, if you're interested. I'm just sharing with you some of my own personal experiences. So, here we go. Yeah, Spirits of the Green Nation. I know I talked about this a while back, but here's the actual writing on it. So this was in 1996. I traveled to Pipestone, Minnesota to a Lakota Sundance ceremony and gathering of the sacred pipes. Now, in 1994, upon meeting Charlie Stryker, he had extended an invitation to me to attend this ancient and most sacred ceremony. Now, Charlie Stryker, I wrote his name in the book as Charlie Stryker, but his name was not that. It's really different. And he's a Heyoka medicine man, and also he's a dog, what they call a dog soldier. Now, the dog soldiers were the one who staked themselves out in front of all the people and stood there to be, I guess they were the first fighters, and they staked themselves to the ground. They were the protectors, and they stood there, and that's called the dog soldier. But Harry Charger, his name was. Now, Harry Charger got his medicine, powerful medicine. He was guided by spirit to stand on the hill. He got struck by lightning 3 times. That was his medicine. Yeah, interesting, right? Yep, he told me that. He had been guided to do that, to receive this particular medicine. Powerful medicine as a healer is what I'm talking about. So, now I had never attended a Sundance at that time, so not having any idea what to expect. But I soon realized the significance of this beautiful and powerful ceremony. Now, I and some others who were attending the Sundance, had been asked to take part in helping build a half-moon ark out of the red stone that had earlier been gathered from the ancient quarry nearby. If you don't know about Pipestone, Minnesota, it's the only place pretty much in this country where there is red stone in a quarry, and the red stone is what is used for the sacred pipes. The chanumpa, and for other, many, oftentimes in the ancient times they used it for tools, for spears and various things. It was quarried there. So the sacred chanumpa is made from this red stone that is found there in Pipestone, Minnesota. So later on, during the Sundance ceremony, the Sundancers would place their respective chanumpas along the arc of these red stones. So there were hundreds of chanumpas there that day. This dance was about to honor the chanumpas, the pipes, sacred pipes. Our job was to lay the cut stone around and on top of the dirt altar. In other words, a lot of dirt was brought in, and it was put in the shape of an arc. So it was maybe about 4 to 5 inches high, and then maybe 8 to 12 inches wide, but made into an arc. And then we were to lay the stones and cover this dirt mound in that shape. Okay, so the Sundance Arbor which surrounds the dance grounds, stood on several acres of flat land near the redstone quarries. Now, this was surrounded by gentle rolling hills that rose in the distance. In prehistoric times, indigenous people traveled to the quarry to take the red stone for its use in many of their tools. So this site, this quarry in Pipestone, Minnesota, was very people in prehistoric times would go there from all over. So after the white buffalo calf pipe woman appeared to the Lakota Nation, she had brought the original sacred chinampa, which had been made from a buffalo bone. She advised them at that time to make a second pipe from the red stone, and this red stone became known as catlinite. That might be a more familiar term to you. So as I began the daunting task of picking through the pile of randomly cut redstone and carefully fitting the puzzle together, because it was like a big puzzle, I became aware of a lilting song nearby. And looking up, I noticed a meadowlark sitting in a distant tree on the hill beyond the arbor. It seemed to be intent on observing our activities while singing its entrancing melody. I don't know if you have ever heard a meadowlark, but it's very beautiful. So we continued working on the giant puzzle. I began to imitate the meadowlark's song in response, and it flew closer, and it landed upon an upturned log near the entrance to the east gate of the Sundance grounds. I'm kind of really pretty good at imitating birds sometimes, and I think I just happened to really be good at it that day because the meadowlark seemed to come forward in response to my singing its song, my whistle. For several hours, we continued to build the stone ark, and the meadowlark stayed put, singing. I began to think that was quite unusual, realizing that birds are constantly moving about, and I had never observed a bird that stayed as long in one spot. So I then recalled this. I read that Sitting Bull, a great Lakota chief, had loved the meadowlark, and I felt the little bird's presence was significant. I wondered if Sitting Bull's spirit was watching us at this Sundance that we were preparing for this ancient ceremony, just saying. The Sundance is considered one of the most sacred ceremonies and a powerful way to pray to the Creator. To take part in the Sundance is a calling and a privilege. The encampment takes on an air of antiquity as one might experience entering a time warp. The long ago native people traveled from very far each summer to meet, to dance, to pray in the manner that their ancestors had for hundreds of years. And by the late afternoon, the sun spread shadows across the many teepees that had been set up, and several had been painted depicting the buffalo, beaver, and other significant animals that marched colorfully around them. Strips of colored cloth had been tied to the tips of the long poles that fanned outward from the tops of the teepee, and each color representing one of the 4 sacred directions, which would be black, red, yellow, and white. Each morning before sunset, a camp caller would alert everyone to meet at the arbor for morning prayers, and soon after the dance would begin. The sacred tree, whose life had been taken by the Sundancers in a very reverent ceremony, had been carried on their shoulders the 1.5 miles to the dance grounds. Now these trees are at least 2 to 3 stories high sometimes, and they're quite large. And the men carry them on their carry these trees on their shoulders to the Sundance grounds. So to raise the sacred tree was a daunting task, and yet everyone pulling together on long ropes soon had it lifted and placed in the center of the dance grounds in a very deep hole. In the morning twilight, the tree that had been covered with hundreds of prayer offerings that day before stood silently waiting. Now, those who participate in the Sundance dress in the traditional manner. Men wear long skirts of red cotton cloth, and some bearing significant symbols. The women wear long cotton dresses with colorful ribbons on their sleeves and a fringed shawl worn around their waists. This long fringe sways gracefully as they dance, and each of the dancers wears sage anklets and wristlets and a sage crown, and many carry large eagle wing feathers. Before sunrise, the dancers would gather silently in semi-darkness. Soon the signal would be given to follow the dance chief through the east gate and into the arbor. Now each day of the Sundance, I stood beneath the arbor that surrounded the dance grounds in support. I wasn't dancing then. I was there. It was the first time I was ever at a Sundance. I wasn't expecting to be a Sundancer. I was there to support the people. It was much later that I had been guided then to become a Sundancer myself. But this was my first experience, so I'm trying to describe it to you and explain it in the way I saw it. So I hope you're kind of like there and can feel it and see it maybe. So several native men sat around the ceremonial drum. A soft glow of the first light of dawn began to spread over the distant mountains. The awakening day filled with bird song, and the signal from the drum was given for the Sundancers to move single file slowly through the east gate and into the center. Now, throughout the days of the Sundance, I stood in the same spot under the arbor. I kept my gaze focused upon a tree that stood on a hill in the distance. I did that every day. I got up with the dancers before the sun rose, and I went to my spot, and I stood there all day long, dancing and singing, and kept my focus upon one tree. And I'm telling you this for a reason. This is a significant part of then what happened. So during the afternoon on the third day, something incredible happened. A giant green figure suddenly appeared on the distant hill. Now, I'm looking at the trees, and suddenly on that day, a shimmering, like a vibration or shimmering, started to happen in the leaves of the trees. And just like coming through a veil, a giant green figure appeared. It was distinguished by bright shimmering leaves. In other words, it was all leaves. It towered over the row of tall trees behind it, too. It was huge. And although amazed at the appearance of this green spirit, I was determined to hold my gaze and not lose my focus, not turn away. But when I noticed a much smaller figure appeared right beside the larger one, in other words, another one came through, like I'd say the portals or the realm. And just as quickly as they appeared, then they disappeared, returning to their hidden dimension. Now, there are stories that tell of the green man or green spirits appearing throughout the world, but these were said to be only myths, right? Yeah, I kind of figured out a long time ago that the so-called myths are really not myths, that they are, accounts, real accounts. That's my sense. That's my belief. I'm going to say it strong. That's what I believe. So, now here on Turtle Island, where I'm living here, okay, and when the Europeans conquered the native people on this continent, their traditional ceremonies, which had honored sacred sites, had ended. So it makes sense then that with this loss and the increase in population and development of roadways in these areas, the spirits finally retreated. And that day at Sundance, when the green spirits appeared to me, I did receive a message. And I want to tell you what they said. They said it was the drumming, the singing, and the praying of the Sundancers that had attracted them. It seemed to me that their curiosity had shifted them momentarily into our dimension, that they were drawn to the familiar yet distant memory of the original people's tribute to the spirits and the Mother Earth during their Sundance ceremony. And when they returned to their hidden realm, they said that they would report to the others that the people had returned, that they were once again praying in the sacred way of the ancestors. So what this means is, in that particular place, and pretty much in many places here on Turtle Island, and for you probably over there wherever you are, your people, your ancestors had places that were sacred that they would go to, and they would have ceremony and honor. They would honor the spirits, the ancestors, and so on in those places. And after the things changed, organized religion came in, and technologies came in, and so on and so forth, and those places were forgotten. Well, that happened here too. And as the ceremony here at Pipestone had been, the Sundance had been there for pretty much hundreds and hundreds of years, the people would go there for that dance. So when the colonizers came here, there were no longer Sundances held there at Pipestone in that place. The Sundance that I went to was the first one that was held in 200 years on that site. So I'm thinking that, yeah, the spirits that showed themselves, that came through, yeah, they had a long time that they went away because the people could no longer pray there. They were no longer feeding the spirits. And this term, feeding the spirits, is very important to remember what this means. Because when I went to Easter Island, which was also annexed by Chile, so the Indian people there, the Rapa Nui people, lost their sacred ways and their ceremonies. When I went there and put my feet on that island, I felt the sorrow of the ancestors there. And the ancestors came to me and said, nobody's feeding us. The people aren't feeding us. There's a lot of sorrow here. What does that mean, the people aren't feeding us? Okay, well, what it means is that the people aren't doing their prayers, their ceremonies, their dances, their songs. But also, they're not feeding them with sacred foods. You know, like in our tradition, we use the berries, the buffalo meat, and the corn, the sacred corn. And this is given to the spirits in gratitude. So before I eat, I have a spirit plate here in the house. My grandchildren, we give a little food, what we're going to eat, to the spirits. Mostly to the little people, because they like to hear the stories about the little people. But these are traditions that have held strong for centuries. And then when the colonizers came, well, you know, you couldn't hold those traditions. You were told you're a devil worshiper, you're a heathen. Yeah, you don't feed the spirits. That's crazy. Yeah, feed the spirits. But anyway, so the spirits told me, the ancestors said, nobody's feeding us. So it was a great sorrow there on that land. So I'm at the Sundance, and the spirits returned because they heard the songs, they heard the people crying and the prayers, and they came back because they hadn't been there in 150 years probably. So, yeah, when the green spirits appeared, I received that message. They said it was the drumming and the singing and the dancers, you know, and the prayers. So it seemed to me, you know, that this was very important, that we remember our ancestors. Yeah, so I realized what a special privilege that was. That was another miracle, I felt, to be able to see the green spirits. Yeah, that was a beautiful gift. So we have to have our ears open, our hearts open, be alert, be aware. If you want this, this can happen for anyone. Anybody can have these experiences. So I'm at chapter 24 here. I hope you're enjoying this. I'm enjoying revisiting this here, sharing it with you. So I'm going to talk about the great mystery that we call the in-between. You know, it's difficult to define exactly what the great mystery is, since a mystery denotes the unknown and the unfathomable. But humans have always looked to the heavens and the earth with a curious notion that there exists something far greater than themselves, that the great mystery cannot be encompassed as one aspect that we can explore or even begin to understand or understand, or we can't package it, we can't tame it. The great mystery is, as is all of nature, variable yet singular at the same time. Nature and its myriad creation continues to mystify us. And in our search to understand, we question humanity's origins and our history, persistently searching for the unknown. Now, often we experience a deep longing, perhaps even feeling that something is missing, yet right at our fingertips. Longing to know the reason for our existence, many find themselves on a lifelong search. They explore the supernatural and the unexplained mysteries of reincarnation, humanity's purpose and desire to return to this earth realm. Humans' capacity to understand or understand, to literally see and actually observe the great mystery, is limited. Yet, if we are to understand the fundamental reasons for our presence on earth and how everyone of us is part of this sacred web, which is crucial to our survival and that deeply affects us, the powerful effect we each have upon the whole, we must first be willing to open ourselves to this great mystery. We must realize that every human is essential in relationship with everything that makes up our whole world and the universe, too, that surrounds us. Now, here's a powerful prayer. Now, sometimes I've used this, but I'm going to share it with you. This is a prayer that may help, kind of like speaking to the greater beings or the greater ones, is to ask to be open. To speak to the universe responds in kind, or like how you speak to the universe listens and will respond to you according to the way you are speaking. It's just the same thing with people. How do you speak to people? Well, they're going to respond to you in kind, the way you're speaking to them. If you're careless or disrespectful, well, you're going to get that back. I think it's the same thing with the universe. The intelligence, I'm going to call it, right? So ask to be open, to be without judgment. Ask to have your eyes open and to see beyond the illusions that we have been led to believe in. To be able to reflect upon the essential nature of our surroundings, to open our hearts and our ears, to be alert to what lies beyond what we have always believed to be reality. And this we must do in order to bypass all that we have been trained to believe is real and true. Because we've been trained very well, indoctrinated into doubting the mystery, doubting the awesomeness, the miracles. So we must be willing to accept that other possibilities do exist, that there are other living beings that abound in our universe that we have been taught to ignore or even fear. So we must without doubt enter unafraid upon the passageway that leads us into the great mystery. The in-between, the incomprehensible, mysterious place known to the shaman or seer, had been shown to me during a time that I spent several days upon a mountain. I was literally transported into the mysterious realm of the great mystery while sitting in quiet prayer within the sacred altar that I had prepared. Now, what I was doing was I was on an Umbalecha, which is called a vision quest, which is 4 days and 4 nights on a mountain with no food and water, but in constant prayer. And this is an experience that I had while doing that, while on this mountain. Yes, I was literally transported into a mysterious realm. So what I was doing was I was holding an unwavering attention, steadily penetrating what happened to be or appeared to be a dormant space between the trees. In other words, I was just holding my focus between two trees in an expansive space. I was just looking and holding my intention, my focus there for days. So after a long period of time, I began to observe something. A delicate vibration in the atmosphere started, and which I had perceived as like an aura. A field like an aura of color and movement. So, and before me and all that surrounded me, everything began to quiver and pulse with life, like a life force that soon began to take a distinct form. Now, I determined that these tremulous forms to be a compilation of sacred geometry, because that's what they started to appear like. So each one consisting of like a hexagon known as the building block of life, and then extending outward into myriad geometric shapes, each one unique, yet determined according to the spatial distance between every tree. Now, each distinct shape of connecting elements contained within its parameter geometric patterns woven together as a continuous, unifying, and delicate system, which might be described as an intricate cellular structure or a web, such as that which one might observe when viewing a leaf under a microscope. This was pretty awesome that I saw this. Now, it became apparent that when I determined to actually see this mysterious web, it immediately disappeared, like a snap of a finger. Okay, so I lost my focus, and I said, I'm gonna, like we do, I'm looking rather than, I'm gonna see this rather than just looking without seeing. It disappeared. So, and then the normal or familiar landscape reappeared before my eyes. So I was fascinated by this, and I tested this strange phenomenon by practicing the art of seeing without looking. When I again maintained stillness, and I held a steadfast gaze into the forest, yes, I was delighted when after some time the non-ordinary universe and shimmering web of sacred geometry once again appeared as a parade of finely woven nets. Shimmering filaments of rope ladders and spirals made up of unearthly colors linked together throughout the whole forest. I was reminded of a nucleus as I observed how the interior space of each geometric form contained a center, its surrounding parameter distinctly symmetrical. So I realized again how privileged I was to have been given a glimpse of the great mystery and the knowledge that there indeed exists a sacred web. It's a life force which emanates from the earth as a divine aura, the sacred web whose finely woven filaments ascend and descend, advancing from tree to tree like invisible ether, which permeates our world and continues on into the celestial heavens. Yes, now I had been shown a minuscule part of the great mystery and the origin of creation as a miraculous strand of DNA that holds our world together. And I'm going to have to stop there, because this does go on. There's more and more and more. Okay, I'm sorry to leave you hanging here because I only got a few minutes, but I do want to tell you, I think Stone Hobbit's coming up, and you want to stay tuned for her. She always has great shows. It's so nice to see everybody here. Angel, Anjames, Chris, Darby, Gaz, Red, Rob, Stone, there you are, Troy, and Van. Thank you so much, you guys. I hope you enjoyed what I shared with you today. Some of the mysteries and my personal experiences and the spirit of things. And I'll be back, I'll be back next Tuesday. We'll do it all over. Thank you so much. Pilamaya, Doksha.